Good morning, folks. We'll run through quickly today because popular demand requires that our VAXXED discussion from yesterday be tagged at the end of this video, which is why you've got a half-hour news today. So let's come to spaceweathernews.com and get started looking at a whole lot of nothing but coronal holes. There has not been any eruptive activity, which is actually an article topic today, and no solar flaring either. Charts are flatlined. Solar wind is hitting its ongoing plateau of intensified solar wind streams, significantly above normal range from the coronal hole, but the slow rise into it allowed our magnetic field to adapt nicely and kept the storm conditions away. Next coronal hole is facing Earth on the north right now. Its solar wind should arrive late Monday or Tuesday of this week. Let's take a peek long term. Total solar irradiance is showing what sunspots and radio flux are now showing as well. We are just about done, heading downward into the trough of the 11-year cycle minimum. Speaking of the sun, there is an article making a huge deal of a sunspot magnetism that shred a potentially erupting filament. I will admit to being somewhat baffled, as the feature noted is one of the least impressive of such features I've seen. The phenomenon of eruption stalling is seen just about every week on the sun, and it is way more peculiar when they get shred nowhere near a sunspot, like just happened this morning. Large filament reaches up and is torn apart and yanked back down. No sunspots nearby. Top lithospheric note was panic caused by a 6.4 that struck 30 kilometers beneath southern Sumatra. No casualties or major damage. Atmospheric news comes in mostly in the form of flooding. These photos are coming in from Nebraska after hail and strong winds were followed up by an enormous inundation of rain. They have the opposite sort of trouble in Ethiopia, where 2 million livestock have died from the drought affecting millions of people, and tally up those millions numbers in Sri Lanka as well. Monsoon hanging further to the north and dropping far too much rain on Nepal and Bangladesh now, in addition to the portions of India and China already hit hard this season. Couple bits of good news though. The Atlantic system is going to miss the United States, swinging up and out, and the Pacific system heading at Japan, likely slated to be doing the exact same thing. Folks, after the usual end shots of this news today, we've got the last 25 minutes of yesterday's podcast about the documentary VAXXED. Remember, there are no images, just audio in the podcasts, and let's just say that when Captain Debunk of YouTube approaches a conspiracy and puts it up publicly, you should recognize that's not something we do very often. Right now, it's 5:15 a.m. in the new Valley of the Sun. Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone. All right, here's the setup. I've got two kids. One is 2 years old, one is 5 months. The Fly on the Wall program often will explore topics that we don't talk about in the morning news, especially if they are relevant and important in the minds of the community members. Vaccines are certainly one of them. The pharmaceutical industry as a whole is one of them. And so with the VAXXED movie having come out, being the response to the last few years' push against the anti-vaccine movement, I did feel it was necessary that I watch the movie and we have a little discussion about it. Now, Billy, you have had a chance to see it. X, you have not, right?
That's right.
Well, X, do you have any... Do you come into this conversation with any opinion on the topic whatsoever?
Oh man, it's going to sound like such a cop-out. I hope someone out there can relate, but I think I already know what I'm going to discover, and I don't know if I have any more anger left in me. You know, it's like defeated, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I was going to buy it last night. I didn't get to the email until last night, but I was just going to buy it last night and watch it, and I went to the website and I watched the 2-minute long preview, and I was getting angry about that.
You're getting angry about the preview.
Well, it'll certainly make you angry.
Yeah, it is angering. So I guess the best way to do this is start with a little summary of what's happening in the film, what they're documenting, and then we'll go through piece by piece and sort of talk about what are the best avenues to actually pull out, and what we would be expecting to be responded to from the mainstream community, and I'll identify some of the things that I think are most important about the film, and I'd love to get Billy's opinion on that as well. Billy, do you want to say anything before I go into a summary, or you just
go ahead with the summary, and then we'll pick up on, because there's a lot. There's so much to it, you know.
Right. So the film was made by Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who is the British gastroenterologist who the British Medical Journal called a fraud for his work linking vaccines and autism. The basic story is a woman came to him, kid had autism, terrible gastro issues, and he was noticing this pattern of gastric distress prior to and after autism. But what really set the kids who got autism apart from the large number of people who had these gastric conditions was their early, and when I say early, their on-time receipt of the MMR vaccine, the triple live virus vaccine of measles, mumps, and rubella. And so we go into a little bit about his story, and we hear from a lot of the parents. We hear from a lot of the parents in Britain and in the United States throughout the film, and that is a very emotionally moving, but we also must admit less scientifically relevant aspect of the program, except when you take them as a whole. And that is probably the most important premise of what I would say is the first portion of this program. That in the 90s, Dr. Wakefield and a number of others published a paper, and their conclusions definitively stated that the paper does not prove a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. What they had was a significant pattern in terms of how these diseases presented. And it wasn't their job, they felt, to censor the stories of all these parents when they were all having the exact same story about a specific type of autism, and that's isolated autism. And now what that means is they have autism isolated from many of the other coexisting or comorbid conditions like cerebral palsy, mental retardation, birth defects, and other things that generally go along with the autism that for so long was thought to be genetic. These are kids who have been progressing normally, many of whom can run, can walk, can talk, and then they regress into autism with no other symptoms. That seems to be the focus, autism that shouldn't have been. If a kid was genetically born to have autism, okay, maybe one day we'll find a way to deal with that, but otherwise, no. There are these separate cases of isolated autism that don't appear that they should have been. And that's what this doctor claims he found a link with the MMR vaccine to. Now, other studies claim to have thoroughly debunked that one. The British Medical Journal called him a fraud. The scientific community definitively rose up against this man and the notion that vaccines were unsafe. And there's been a serious public effort to reassure everyone of that fact. And, tens, hundreds of millions, if not more, have received vaccines and have not been harmed by them. And that is a very strong point and one of the premises of the opposition to the anti-vax movement. So that is sort of the first, first 20 minutes after the general introduction. But then we sort of jump ahead to now and what's happening right now. And apparently what happened is there was a case of isolated autism where not only did this kid develop normally, the kid was exceeding milestones like you couldn't believe. I mean, the kind of thing where you were like, oh, this kid looks like they're pretty advanced, they're pretty intelligent. What do their kids do? Or what do their parents do? Oh, they're scientists. The father has over 60 technical and scientific papers. Maybe this apple's not falling too far from the tree. Got the MMR vaccine and immediately receded into autism. And the father went on a hunt. And the father ended up getting in touch with Andrew Wakefield, having interactions with the CDC. It's at this point in the film when Andrew Wakefield brings up the fact that he found that not only were his studies showing these things, but he actually found that the studies that were used to get MMR vaccines cleared in the through the FDA had airbrushed and basically manipulated dangerous results. And one of the statements that really pops out to me when he was asked about this in a press conference back in the 90s was when he said the link between MMR and autism was first made in the United States, and they are from the actual testing that was done that supposedly got this thing approved in the first place. And so here we basically have the voice of parents who are telling a similar story, one doctor who says that this is the way it is, and the entire scientific community otherwise rising up against their message. And so we're at the point where this father, who had this advanced child who receded into isolated autism, his name's Brian Hooker. Brian Hooker gets a call from a whistleblower inside the CDC. The lead, the principal investigator of the study that is basically used to prove there is no link between autism and these vaccines, and the study that is used to deny the victims compensation from the pharmaceutical companies. He basically said that they did find a link, and they manipulated the numbers, they tried to work around it, and in some cases they just blatantly omitted things. The phone calls are recorded. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that this man is who he is claiming to be. He absolutely is Dr. William Thompson, the principal investigator of that study. And he claims that when his superiors got involved in what was supposed to be a 6-month study, after he expressed these troubling signs, I'm trying to remember the way he described it, these sensitive or troubling statistical results. That the question is, how do you struggle with statistical results? Science is science. by the time his superiors got involved, he found himself in a six-way conversation where he was fifth in line in terms of rank, making decisions about what to cut and what to include in the paper. And he was the principal investigator of the study in the first place. He's claiming that basically upper management came in, shut it down, and now we're in a situation where all the other authors have basically come out and taken a stance that, nope, we did not do this. We did not destroy those documents. We did not hide this data. Dr. Thompson is lying. When Brian Hooker, the father, who is more than just a father, as I said, he had more than 60 technical and scientific papers, which is a big number. When he published his papers on what he found based on the data that William Thompson helped him acquire, Dr. Thompson, of course, realized that he was going to be outed very quickly. That's when he gave all of his documents to Congressman Bill Posey. Bill Posey in 2005 stood up in front of Congress and begged Congress to call William Thompson to the stand and subpoena him to testify about this fraud at the CDC. They have not done so. They have refused to do so. That is the current stage. We had Andrew Wakefield in the 90s claiming this link between the vaccines and autism. We had the scientific community rise up against him and then rise up in favor of vaccines. We have this whistleblower basically helping Brian Hooker get this information. He is on tape saying they destroyed documents, saying, I can't believe we did what we did, saying, of course, race was a factor, and that was the biggest thing. The time that we are supposed to give MMR vaccines to children is the most dangerous time they found to give it to African American children, which just rings of historical racism in this country on a level that kind of makes one's skin crawl. Even though you know it still exists, it's pervasive. It is pleasant that it is largely hidden from our daily lives. Sorry, I didn't want to go on a tangent like that there, but that's basically where we stand now. It's a shame, but Brian Hooker's papers have been retracted twice. And so those are no longer considered valid by the scientific community. And in fact, the fact that they have been retracted is considered a negative point. That is actually not in the movie VAXXED, but outside of that, those papers were retracted. And something else that isn't covered in the film is the full story of what the British Medical Journal accused Andrew Wakefield of doing. Some of the way he acquired his data was they were fairly invasive on these special needs kids to the point where a lot of doctors were saying, I can't believe you did that to these kids. And so I find myself in a position where it's hard to know what to think about his science, and it's hard to argue with doctors when they're talking about ethics with patients. It's hard to start an argument about retracted papers. But in my head, and here's the thing, the co-authors of on this fraudulent CDC paper, allegedly fraudulent paper, nobody's denying that it's William Thompson's voice on these calls. Nobody's denying that the principal investigator claims the CDC committed fraud in the vaccine safety studies. Nobody is denying that that is the current state of things. The principal investigator of the vaccine safety study used by the CDC claims that they committed fraud to hide how dangerous things really were. Now, his co-authors all disagree, all say he's lying. Bill Posey has put this to Congress. Congress has done nothing. That is where we stand right now. There's been no response to VAXXED. And if you want to take like, if you hate that I'm even talking about this subject, and you want to say, hey, look, I trust the British Medical Journal. Hey, they retracted Hooker's papers for a reason. There is still the issue of the principal investigator, who actually was supposed to already have testified before Congress, by the way. And when they found out what he was going to say, they switched him out at the last minute for one of the authors who was willing to go along with it. So that, to me, is a significant open question about this. Billy, I'm happy to let you sort of take it from here if you'd like.
Well, I mean, as they say, follow the money. And, of course, if you look at it, it could very well be about money, but there's also another side that I think, it's this arrogance of prestige that won't allow some people to admit that they're wrong, this high-up situation. I mean, all right, the documentary shows that while a corporation can't legally donate money directly to the CDC, a government installation, they can get money from foundations. And it shows in the documentary clearly, they even admit that some foundations were set up specifically to funnel money from Merck Chemical, Pfizer, directly to the CDC through a foundation.
Yeah, and there's that.
That's clearly there.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, there's still this arrogant attitude among a lot of people. And I hate to say this politically, but it is. It falls right in line with the leftist attitude of I'm better than you, and you do what I say.
And you know what? The revolving door between regulation and industry that we have become accustomed to hearing about in the GMO world with Monsanto, it is equally as prevalent here, unfortunately. And you saw that with the woman who is basically responsible for not letting William Thompson speak, for switching him out last minute for the person who would not tell the real results. That person is now the head of the vaccine division at Merck in a very high-paying job. So that's a big problem. And there's also the problem of conflict of interest. So, if you are familiar with how the USDA is charged with the safety and of the people, and with the promotion of agriculture, and you realize that, hey, wait a minute, that means they're required to promote the sugar industry and the genetically modified cattle industry and all these other things. In supporting the health of the people, they can't also support every industry. Well, the CDC has the job of doing the vaccine studies. It is also their job to convince everyone vaccines are safe. That is one of the worst conflicts of interest I have ever heard of in my life. And it's not like that's some big secret. And I just didn't even really think about it until watching the movie. But that is literally the most preposterous thing. That is asking somebody to police themselves. That is the Federal Reserve saying we're not doing anything wrong. That is the cartel saying we are not bringing drugs across the border. You have to be able to wrap your head around that concept at least, because it's vital. And when you hear what the principal investigator is saying, and you see some of his documents that they showed there, and when you see the footage of Congressman Bill Posey saying, we must call this man to testify before Congress, and you realize nothing's happened, even me sitting here where first of all, I love debunking the dumb stuff in our community, and there actually have been a ton of dumb theories about vaccines. I am now enraged by what I saw, and the fact that Dr. William Thompson, if he doesn't get subpoenaed by Congress, he can't just go on a talk show. He can't just go sharing this information, or he'll go to jail.
He even asked to be subpoenaed.
He asked to be subpoenaed, yeah, because It's the only way he can share the information and not go to jail. He basically had, he didn't even just give the information to Mr. Booker. He had to tell Booker about a citizen's request option that existed that would allow Booker to request otherwise classified data. And why is this children's safety study classified? Why is this stuff classified in the first place?
I brought up the political side. I know that, well, this thing really hit publicity around between 2012 2014. Am I not correct?
Yeah.
It really got enlightened to the public, were made aware of a lot of this that's going on. And during that time, if anybody paid any attention, and I actually remember some of these propaganda put out by all the mainstream media on a measles outbreak that happened, or supposedly happened. That lets you know that who's actually pulling strings here. The pharmaceutical industry has influence over the media in order to put out propaganda to try to quell this. They actually did that.
Yeah.
I mean, that shows, it's the same signature as climate change. It's literally doing the same thing politically.
Yeah. So, the movie as a whole, it's interesting. It does not take an anti-vaccination stance. In fact, one of its main points is that you either need to wait a little longer before you indeed give your kid the vaccine, or this super combination giving kids all this other stuff, and the triple live virus vaccines need to go. This video says you still need to vaccinate your kids. We just need to pump the brakes a little bit on how fast and how hard we're going with it.
Right. I think it said you were 7 times less likely to wait if you wait just 18 more months, 3 years.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I have to imagine that a lot of the folks who saw this movie and were like, I don't want to watch that, they probably assumed this was going to be like the most significantly anti-vax movie ever. But really, it's not even an anti-vaccination movie, is it, Billy? Right?
No.
It's not an anti-vaccination movie.
What I find so alarming about it is the fact that they're so against even looking at it.
Uh-huh.
When something has the possibility to destroy a life from its beginning to its end over something like a disease that only lasts for a few days or a week. This makes absolutely no sense to me. The measles, the mumps, and rubella all only have symptoms for about 2 weeks at most.
Yeah, and they want to talk about...
This is designed to prevent that, yet you run a very high risk of destroying that child for its entire life because of it.
Yeah,
no way.
And you know what else? They can say, well, take a look at what those diseases used to do. Yeah, take a look at what a common cold used to do. Take a look at what a sprained ankle used to do. Take a look at what a cut on your leg used to do. Medicine has gotten to the point now where, can you imagine if instead of these vaccines we had been finding ways to just better treat people who end up getting the stuff? Or better treating our body's health so that our immune system can fight it?
I think all 3 of those diseases, once you have them, you'll never catch them again. The body creates natural. Same thing with chicken pox,
Yeah.
I actually had those when I was a kid. My sister had the measles,
I had chicken pox.
And who's to say it's not best to let that run its course? It makes a stronger immune system hereditarily throughout the rest of the family.
Yeah.
Rather than the vaccine. That's just my opinion, because I don't know scientifically,
Yeah, well, I can tell you that from a scientific standpoint, I will grant going on Hooker's papers or trying to revisit Wakefield's stuff presents a challenge scientifically. When the principal investigator of a scientific study that is this important is claiming what he has claimed, and rather than an investigation, a silencing, a muzzling is taking place, I presume guilt. Because if there is nothing to hide, what are you afraid of?
Yeah, exactly.
It's that simple. Anyway, we're right up on our time here, but we'll do this again next week, and I will see you all in the morning. Good chat, guys. Be safe, everyone.